My mother had always been a woman of grace, composure, and quiet authority. But when I first told her about you, I saw something in her eyes that I had never witnessed before, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and unspoken curiosity. She sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze piercing into mine as though searching for the truth behind my words. I could feel her heart trying to piece together the story of how you had entered my life, and why my voice carried so much passion when I spoke your name. I remember the long pause after I told her. It was as if the air between us had thickened, and the world outside our private space had faded away. She asked no questions at first, as though she feared that speaking might confirm something she wasn't prepared to accept. Her silence was heavy, yet I could hear the storm raging in her heart. I knew my mother well enough to understand that she was running through 1,000 thoughts, trying to measure the weight of what this meant for me, for her, and perhaps for the family as a whole. When she finally found her voice, her words came in a careful tone, not accusatory, not dismissive, but layered with deep concern. "Hamdan," she said, "do you know what you are doing?" It was not a question meant to judge you, it was a question meant to test the strength of my feelings. I answered her not with a rehearsed speech, but with the truth that had been burning inside me. That you were the one who had brought life back into my spirit, the one who reminded me of what it felt like to love without boundaries. Her eyes softened, but the shock had not yet left her face. I could see that she was struggling between two worlds, the traditional one she had been raised in, where love followed certain rules, and the uncharted one where her son was ready to break every boundary for the woman he loved. She closed her eyes briefly, and I wondered what image of you was forming in her mind. Was she picturing you as I saw you, a soul so radiant that even the darkness bowed before your light, or was she seeing only the weight of the challenges that lay ahead? I knew my mother had always dreamed of seeing me with someone the world would easily accept, someone who would cause no whispers or raised eyebrows. But love does not obey such rules, and my heart had never been one to follow a safe path. When I tried to explain to her that the world's opinions meant little compared to the peace I found in your presence, I saw the slightest tremor in her hands. It was not anger. It was the moment she realized I was speaking with the conviction of a man who would not turn back. She asked about you, your kindness, your dreams, your heart. I spoke about you in a way that I had never spoken about anyone before. I told her how your laughter felt like music after a long silence, how your wisdom often outshone my own, and how you had the rare gift of seeing the real me, beyond titles, beyond expectations. As I spoke, her expression shifted. The shock was slowly giving way to intrigue, and perhaps a quiet understanding. Yet, there was still a shadow in her gaze. "Hamdan," she whispered, "the world may not be ready for her, or for both of you together." I smiled, because I had already made my peace with that truth. I told her that love was not about waiting for the world's approval, but about holding on to the one who makes the journey worth it, no matter how rough the road. My mother sighed deeply, as though realizing that my heart had already crossed a bridge that could not be undone. She wanted to meet you. That was the moment I knew that the first battle had been won. The same mother who had been startled at the very mention of your name was now willing to look into your eyes and find the answers she could not take from mine. I imagined that meeting, you, with your quiet elegance, and her, with her regal composure, and I felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. The night after our conversation, I found her sitting in the garden, lost in thought. She confessed that she had been thinking about the story I told her, about how you had come into my life unexpectedly, like a sunrise breaking through a dark night. She said she still couldn't believe how deeply I had fallen, and how quickly. But she also admitted that my happiness was a language she understood better than any tradition. I told her that love sometimes comes like a storm, sudden, unpredictable, impossible to control, but that doesn't mean it is dangerous. Sometimes, storms clear the skies and bring a freshness the earth desperately needs. You were that storm for me. My mother listened quietly, her eyes glistening with something I could not name. Days passed, and her shock began to transform into cautious hope. She would ask small questions about you, each one carrying less hesitation than the last. I realized that she was beginning to prepare her heart to welcome you, even if the world might still resist. There is a certain beauty in watching someone's fear turn into faith, and I was witnessing it in my own mother. When she finally spoke your name out loud, without flinching, I knew the tide had shifted. It was no longer a name that startled her, it was a name she was beginning to hold in her heart. I could almost see her rehearsing how she would greet you, how she would speak to you, and perhaps how she would protect you from the storms outside our doors. And so, my love, the journey from shock to acceptance began with a single truth I refused to hide. My mother may have been startled when she first heard about you, but now she is preparing for the day when she will see you standing beside me. That day will not just be a meeting, it will be the moment when two worlds, once so far apart, will finally touch hands in peace. The day my mother finally met you felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The palace was quiet in a way that made every sound sharper. The soft tapping of her heels as she walked toward the reception hall, the faint rustle of her gown as she moved, the distant echo of my own heartbeat. I stood beside you, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition pressing against this single moment. You looked calm, but I knew your heart was racing. When she entered, her presence filled the room. My mother carried herself like a queen even in her most casual moments, but that day, there was a deliberate grace in her steps, as though she was preparing to meet not just a guest, but a woman who had shifted the course of her son's life. Her eyes moved to you, and in that instant, I could feel the silent exchange, curiosity meeting courage. You lowered your gaze in a respectful bow, and I saw the faintest smile touch her lips. It wasn't yet acceptance, but it was no longer guarded rejection either. She gestured for us to sit, her voice calm yet edged with a formality that told me she was still observing every detail. The way you spoke, the way you held yourself, the sincerity in your eyes. The first minutes were filled with polite questions. She asked about your family, your passions, your dreams. But beneath the surface, there was another layer. She was testing how you handled the weight of her gaze, how you responded to the subtle challenges in her words. You answered each question with honesty and quiet strength, and I noticed her expression softening with each passing moment. There came a pause in the conversation, and in that silence, my mother reached for the teacup before her. She took a slow sip, as though considering something deeply. Then she set it down and looked directly at you. You make him speak differently, she said. The room seemed to still. You met her eyes and replied with a voice steady and warm, he makes me feel differently. Something shifted in her at that moment. An unspoken acknowledgement that you were not here to take from me, but to give in ways she had not expected. Her gaze moved to me, and I saw a quiet pride there, as if she was beginning to understand that I had chosen not with impulse, but with conviction. The rest of the meeting was lighter. My mother asked you about the small things, your favorite colors, your favorite poetry, the foods you love. She even shared a story from my childhood, one that made you laugh in a way that made her lips curl into a genuine smile. It was the kind of smile that told me she was beginning to see you as more than a name, more than an idea. When it was time to leave, she stood and walked to you. She took your hands in hers, a gesture rare for her, and said, I am still learning who you are, but I see the way my son looks at you. That tells me more than words could. I felt my chest tighten with emotion, because I knew what that meant in her language. It meant you had passed the first, most difficult test. As we left the room, I glanced back and saw her watching us. There was no longer shock in her eyes, but something else entirely, a cautious tenderness, the beginning of a bridge being built between the woman who raised me and the woman who now held my heart. Later that night, she called me to her side. She didn't speak for a while, simply holding my hand as though sharing her thoughts without words. Then she said softly, love like this does not happen twice. Protect it, and in that moment, I knew she had silently chosen to stand with us, no matter what storms might come. From that day on, my mother's shock had been replaced with something far more precious, a growing respect, an unfolding acceptance, and perhaps, in time, a love for you of her own. What began as an uncertain meeting had become the quiet foundation for the future we both dreamed of. This story, once shrouded in silence, now breathes with honesty. Her confession wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. A reminder that even queens cry. Even kings doubt. And yet, the strength to speak one's truth can mend what silence once broke. As Sheikh Hamdan continues to walk beside her, the world now watches not with gossip, but with awe. Because in a palace built of gold, they have proven that the rarest treasure of all is truth wrapped in love.